So please give a warm welcome to Patty and Judy.
Thank you. I'm glad to see people. I wasn't sure how many, if I'd be talking to one person or just myself or what, so it's good to see you this morning. Yes, I work for Pasadena Heritage, which is Pasadena's nonprofit organization dedicated to advocating for and educating the public about historic properties in and around Pasadena. I've been there for 11 years, and we are actually about to have another spring tour at the end of March that we are not quite sure is going to happen yet as of today. So we're living in very strange times for the first time in 11 years, considering not having an event is a very strange thing to do. But I was asked to come and talk to you all today about the Mills Act program and what it is and what it does for the property owner and the subsequent owners after that. How many of you are familiar at all with the Mills Act program? A few of you. Okay. So I'm going to kind of start with the very basics and then go a little bit further into it. Just so you know, I can tell you a lot about the Mills Act program in Pasadena. Each city, if they have a Mills Act, not all of them have them, but if they have them, they're a little bit different. Some programs, some cities have an unlimited number of Mills Acts that they will distribute. Pasadena, because we have so many historic properties, they have to limit it to, I think it's 20 per year. I am fortunate enough to live in a house that has the Mills Act program, so I've been through this process, so hopefully I can help answer any questions. But specifically to each city, you need to find out what that city's rules are and requirements. They're very similar in many, many ways. So what is the Mills Act program? In 1972, Governor Reagan, on December of 1972, these were the reasons that the Mills Act program came together. And they were suggested by Senator James Mills, actually in 1977. So the purpose of my bill is to provide an incentive to restoring and maintaining points of historical interest in California. The state abounds with priceless treasures of our dynamic history, and all too often we've seen invaluable links with our past fall to the bulldozers, oh, this is very dramatic, to the bulldozer's blade as developers greedily devoured our heritage in the name of progress. Very dramatic. My legislation will provide an incentive to preserve historically significant landmarks so that future generations will be able to appreciate California's cultural diversity. So that is the reason this came about, was because they saw so many of our great historic properties just going away. And they said, no, we've got to do something to assist with that. So there are terms, contract terms. This is an actual contract that the homeowner has to sign with the city. So the contract runs for a minimum term of 10 years, and it's a little confusing because it's renewed every year for another 10 years. So even though they say 10 years, it just means they need to review it and make sure that you're heading toward your goals of what you said you were going to do with your house. So the contract runs with the land, not with that particular owner, but with that property. So if you sell that property, the next owner inherits that contract with the property. The property must be maintained in accordance with the Secretary of Standards of California's building code. So you can't just say, I think this would look really great if I blew out this side house. It still looks historically like this house. That's not the Secretary of Interior standard, so they would say, no, you can't do that, even though you think it looks nice and looks historic. It doesn't meet the standards of the California Interior standards. And the property may be periodically inspected in order to make sure that you're adhering to your contract. So who's eligible, at least in Pasadena, different cities have different eligibility requirements, any designated historical property. So it could be individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It could be a city historic monument or landmark. It could be in a landmark district. That's how mine qualifies, because I live in a historic district. It could be a non-contributing property, meaning that it doesn't actually actually fit in with the rest, doesn't meet the qualifications of being historic now, but if your contract includes, we're going to restore this house so that it will become part of the contributing structures, then you can be approved. So that's a little bit tricky, because if you're just going to keep it the way it is, and you're non-contributing, you don't have historical details to your house anymore, because they've been changed over the years, then they won't give you the contract. But if your contract states, we're going to put in a period appropriate windows, we're going to take out this strange door that was put in 1963, and we're going to put in a 1910 door, then they'll say, okay, well that contract actually qualifies and we'll accept that. Undesignated properties may apply at the same time that they're applying for designation. So if you're currently not a designated property, you want to become one, and you want to apply for the Mills Act, you can actually do that at the same time. And in Pasadena, we have a valuation limit of $1,500,000. So if your house is worth more than $1,500,000, you're probably, they have a very limited number of contracts they'll get for that. Because the idea is if you can afford a property worth $1,500,000, you're probably in a different economic class of people who can afford on your own to go ahead and do those sorts of maintenance and upkeep and all of that to your historic property. If you bought a house for $250,000, chances are your economic situation is different and you probably could use that extra tax incentive. So what do you get for all of these things? You get about a 50% reduction in your property taxes, which is a huge amount of money. The idea is that that money that you save on your property taxes will be built into your restoration project and your contract. Somebody from the city comes out when you develop your contract. They walk around the house with you to make sure that what you've asked for is appropriate for what you're contracting to do. So if you're saying we want, most of the time, if you're asking for your bathrooms and your kitchens to be redone, chances are they're not going to include that in your contract, because almost everybody's bathrooms and kitchens need to be redone, whether you live in a historic property or not. There are some exceptions to that. My house actually does have an exception to that, because so much of the rest of my house was untouched that the bathroom and kitchens, like I have two kitchens, were such an eyesore compared to the rest of the house. They said, we need to help you save money so that you can redo this kitchen and bathroom and bring the house really back to the way it was. So there are exceptions to the rules, but as a general rule, bathrooms and kitchens always need redone, so they don't count. What you have to have for the city in order to be part of the Mills Act, what you have to be able to get to them, the application requirements for a historical property is, first you have to fill out the application and turn it in, and the contract. You have to have a statement as to why your property should be appropriate for a Mills Act. You should have a restoration rehabilitation plan. In 5 years, I'm going to get the foundation redone. In 7 years, the house needs to be repainted. In 8 years, we're going to have to put a new roof on it. In 9 years, our windows are going to either have to be replaced because old aluminum windows have been put in instead of my beautiful wood casement windows. So that's the kind of contract they're looking for you to go through your house, talk about what issues need to be corrected or updated or fixed. And then you have to have a site plan. Where's your house on the property site? Photographs of its current condition. If you have historic photographs of what it was like when it was built, they want to see those as well. You have to have a current tax bill to show them what your current taxes are so that they can do the crazy mathematical equations that they do, which I don't quite understand, to figure out what your tax reduction will be. You have to have a copy of the grant proving that you own the house, and you have to have your taxpayer protection form. The city approves up to 20 contracts in Pasadena. As I said, we have so many historic properties, they can only afford to issue a few a year. If the applications received exceed the limit, then they have to sort of, figure out which ones are the top priorities. So if you're in a historic district and your house is so completely different than the ones that live next to you, they're going to consider that more of a priority. If your house is threatened, meaning that it's like developers are trying to buy you out and we know that you're not in a protected zone, that would be a reason to up the ante on your property. If you have an economic hardship that says, look, if we don't get this tax incentive in the next 3 years, we're gonna, the house is falling apart around us, we're not gonna be able to do this. If you're in a revitalization area where all of the houses are sort of up and coming, you'll be considered a higher priority. And if your house has historic significance, if you can prove who the architect was and it was an important architect, or that it had a significant history about it in some way or another, or something like that, it will do that. So foundations are looked at for seismic strengthening. That's one good thing. I'm trying to quickly run through this for you. Exterior porches and balconies, which give so much of the detail and character to a home. If those have been changed and you want to bring those back, that's a high consideration. Roofs, structures, because that can, your roof messes up and you get leaks in the house, the inside of your house is just a mess. Chimney work, especially, we've had so many earthquakes that have damaged a lot of our historic chimneys. We want them to be rebuilt in a historically appropriate way, but of course in a way that keeps to the standards of earthquake and seismic stuff and all that good stuff. Windows are another big one. If windows have been taken out or removed and put in with something that's not appropriate, we would like for them to be put in something appropriate. And on the interior, a lot of interior features are not really included because those are not seen by the right-of-way. But if the interior has a really significant detail, back shelter fireplaces, for example, are very looked at as being one of those things people want to restore. That's good too. And if you have mechanical, engineering, electrical, plumbing issues that need to be redone, those sorts of interior structural things are done. If you just want to paint the living room from green to yellow or something like that, that kind of stuff doesn't count because everybody wants to do things like that. So that's kind of what the Mills Act is. That's how you get accepted into the Mills Act program, and it goes on from one homeowner to the next homeowner. And for the people who have it, they have really appreciated having it. In Pasadena, the inspections don't happen all that often, so if you realize, oh my gosh, I have to use that money to pay for my son's college tuition, and you use it that way one year, nobody's coming knocking on your door saying, where's that new foundation you promised us? But if after 10 years you haven't done anything, they're going to reevaluate your contract and figure out why you haven't done anything, and maybe make you redo the contract with a new plan and work on it in that way. After you've finished all the work that you have in your contract and you say, we've finished the foundation, we've gotten the new windows, we've put on the new roof, we're kind of done. They say, yeah, but in an old house in 3 more years you're going to have something else that's going to happen. So they don't take the contract away from you. You keep the contract forever and ever unless you and the city come to an agreement that you want to break the contract. So that's what the Mills Act program is. If you have any questions, I can answer. I'd be happy to do so. Yeah.
My question is, what is the cost of getting the Mills Act? Because usually you have to hire people, right?
Not necessarily. There is no application fee, so you don't have to pay a fee to apply for it. And my husband and I have done enough contracting work on a previous house that we kind of knew what it would cost to get a new roof. We knew what it would cost to get new plumbing or whatever done. So we estimated. We said, we think it's going to cost this amount. And so that's what we put in our contract. So we never hired anybody to come out and survey us or do anything like that. Sure, you could hire somebody to fill out a contract for you, and there are places that would do that, but it's not necessary at all. So there's no cost to the homeowner to apply. Good question. Yeah.
What's the application process? Like, how long? Like, usually it takes 3 months or 6 months before approval?
Oh, I see. Yeah, so in Pasadena, the applications are due in May. So you can, however long it takes you to fill out the application in May, and then they approve them. Usually they come out for an inspection of your house by August, and it's approved by October. but you don't see that savings in your taxes until the following tax year. So it seems like it takes a long time, but it's really not. It's just because you have to wait a whole tax season before you actually start seeing those results. So by October of the following year, when we got our property taxes, December, that December bill was finally where we saw those changes. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. You had another? Oh, okay, up here.
So the contracts for work are anticipatory. They're looking forward and they're saying, this is what we plan to do, please authorize it. But the compensation does not show up in a tax break until the following tax year.
That's correct.
So no funds are advanced to someone, for instance, who's in a hardship situation.
That's
and
correct.
struggling to maintain. Are there alternative plans to address that?
Well, not that I know of. There is a very, very new state tax incentive for historic property owners. It's so new that we don't quite understand or know all the details to it yet. We're really looking forward to understanding more. That may be an area where it could help with that, but we just don't know enough about that yet. And to further answer that question, it does not, you cannot put in your contract things that you've already done. So if you've already put on a new roof, then that doesn't count in your 10-year program, because you're not going to need a new roof in 10 years. You know, you could maybe apply 10 years from now and say that you would, but yeah.
So the homeowner, anticipating what they're going to do, the estimates are approved, the work is approved, and they know that they're going to see a commensurate reduction in their property taxes that recompensate their bank account.
Correct.
For instance, on what they've worked on.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Mhm. So I think we had a 50% reduction in our property taxes. They went from like $3,000 to $1,500. So every year we were saving $1,500. After 3 years, we had enough in order to redo our chimney, which is actually getting done right now as we speak. In fact, that's why I was 10 minutes late, because the contractor for our chimney showed up right when I was leaving. So that's what we ended up, that was our choice on how we handled that.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
Does a new set only apply to older house? How about in the, like the 30, 40 years old house, does it apply to?
Not usually. Sort of the definition of a historic home would be 50 years or older. Anything that was built in the last 30 years probably would not count unless it's a very significantly historic home. The idea is that in the ones that are sort of in the falling down stage or really needing work stage are the ones that we're trying to help. If it's 30 years old, hopefully it shouldn't need that much work at this time, a new roof. But yeah, so it's usually for those really historic homes. Mm-hmm.
So if a home needs a lot of work, will the homeowner ever have to invest more than the tax savings? Or is that going to be looked at as I guess I'm worried about a homeowner feeling burdened by all the things that maybe the city official finds need to be restored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I save in taxes is never going to cover the amount of work that needs to be done on my house. I'm going to have to invest a lot of my own money. It's just an incentive to help me along the way. Yeah, it's just a little extra money to help, put that new roof on, things like that. Yeah, you're going to have to invest your own money. Yeah. Anything else?
Patty, I have a question. Does Mills Act just apply to single-family homes, or can it be applied to multifamily properties?
That's a good question. I usually deal with residential. Let me take a quick look. I'm looking for the version, hold on. I don't see anything in here like about apartment buildings, but if you own a home that's now a duplex or something like that, then it would count. If it's in a historic district, and if it's part of a, or if it's individually listed. Like my first house in a historic district was a duplex, and it counted, it could have been put on the Mills Act. But if it's an apartment building, I'm not quite certain. Probably, well, remember there's a $1.5 million limitation. Most apartment buildings are going to be more than $1.5 million. Yeah.
Okay, and then what is the difference between landmark and a property that has Mills Act? Because there are landmark properties as well that don't have the Mills Act.
Correct. Right. So if you're a landmark property, that means that you just have a designation from the city that says, yes, we acknowledge that your home is of a historic quality that we want to have preserved. And there are some protections that we will afford you by being a landmark or in a landmark district. There's no financial incentive for being in a landmark district. It's really just a protection when it comes to like new zoning laws, things like that. And individual landmark areas have restrictions on what you can and cannot do to your home. For example, I live in Bungalow Heaven Historic District. We cannot change out the windows in the front of our house, but if we wanted to change them out in the back, we could because nobody can see them. If we wanted to do some interior changes, those are okay, but frontal, we couldn't change off our porch, for example. If we wanted to take down a wall, please don't take down walls, that we could. Yeah, so that's the difference. There's no financial incentive to be part of one, it's just a protection of property kind of thing. Yeah.
I want to let you guys know that Patty, she is so well known about historical buildings in Pasadena. I'm her docent for many, many years, and I'm also on her education before, but I kind of quit because I'm too busy. But this nonprofit organization is about protecting old historical homes. So if you're selling a home, maybe a craftsman home or a mid-century home, whatever the home it is, please check before your client tears it down, because they do protect those homes. You have to understand those are very well known. If you guys are willing to go to craftsman home, if I haven't heard anything about not having it,
No.
but it's coming up in end of March.
Well, we're having our spring home tour on March 29th, but I actually have a meeting this afternoon about whether that's going to happen or not due to our current health crisis in our world. And so it may be postponed, but we have another tour in May that's happening in the Hastings Ranch area, that East Pasadena, where there's a lot of California ranch houses, because we want to highlight those, because those are now over 50 years old, so we're looking at those. And we give monthly walking tours of exteriors of old Pasadena, because we help save that, and neighborhood walking tours. We have one coming up of the Arden Road District, which is one of our newest landmark districts in Pasadena that has a wide variety of architectural styles. If one of the things that would help you as a realtor is figuring out your vocabulary for architecture, like what do I call that house, what do I call that house, one of these walking tours could really be helpful to you, because that's what they do. They point out this is a Monterey style home because it has a second story porch that runs all the way across, and you'll learn those kinds of details too. So my whole point is education, so if you come, you'll get educated about any of those things.
There's a website, right? We have
Yes,
a website.
well, you're such a good at commercials, Lane. I brought two things.
I believe in you.
Yeah,
I believe in Pasadena, I heard.
I brought two things. One is our membership information. It has our website and information about how people can become members. And the other one is our postcard about our spring home tour. But like I said, I'm not sure we're going to have a spring home tour. But still, it also has our contact information and everything on it. And I'll give you a sense of what kinds of tours we give, what kinds of houses we have on it. This particular tour is focusing on the architect Wallace Neff, who is kind of a very underrated guy, but he was probably one of the most prolific architects who did everything from Lucille Ball's house to the tiny bubble houses, which were considered low-income houses that they did in some country in Africa, and it was just a way to get people in a building. But I'm going to leave these two for you, and golly, there's one other thing I had on my mind that I wanted to say. It was about
The end of the year, we have the end of the year.
oh, we've got lots of things going on.
Oh, Pasadena walking tour.
Yeah.
I used to be a docent for that one.
Yeah.
That was pretty hard.
That's
If you guys want to be a docent or help out, I went to a lot of beautiful, magnificent homes of the craftsman homes, which I'm in love with. But however, I probably will not buy them because it's
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, okay? But the people who own the house and put it in the property was amazing. And also I learned those homes in Pasadena, Pasadena Heritage sometimes has a CCNR on that they cannot sell the house without the approval of the Pasadena Heritage. So, you know, when you guys sell a house in Pasadena or any of the old homes, make sure you check the title and let the client know. Some clients are not happy with that, and some people are perfectly fine with it. So double check those homes. If you guys have any question about Pasadena Heritage, join it. I went in not knowing what I was doing in the beginning, and I fell in love with it because the house was so beautiful. You get to see how people renovated the whole house, and you know, it's very exciting, and to meet the owner and what they put in. And Patty always bringing up good homes to show. You want to talk about the docent program or no?
I could talk about anything. Just quickly on what you had mentioned, there are a couple of different ways that we protect old houses. One is we put them in a landmark district, or we individually list them as a landmark, and then after they can become a national landmark district, or a national landmark individually listed, or we can be part of our easement program. And our easement program is a one-time fee to Pasadena Heritage. It depends on the value of your house, is how it's calculated. You give that fee to Pasadena Heritage, and then for the life of that house, whoever owns that house has to come to us if they want to make any changes. We have lots of easements in Old Pasadena. That was one of the ways that we were able to revitalize that area. You know, it's an example to the nation on how to do downtown revitalization. We go to conferences and they start talking about downtown revitalization. Old Pasadena comes up on the screen and we're like, well, wait a minute, they didn't ask us to talk about it, but they all know about it. And in fact, there's a building that's in the middle of being painted. Part of it is gray and white, and the other part is red and white right now. But the owner of that building in Old Pasadena had to come to us so that we could approve paint colors. So there are lots of things that you can't do to your house under the easement program until you've come to us for approval. So that's another protection that we do. That's a different level. Not everybody, like Ling said, not everybody's into that, but it's a good way to keep your house. Yes?
Is Bungalow Haven part of the landmark district?
It is. It is the first city landmark district back in 1989, I think. I forget the date, but in the 80s. 51% of the neighbors had to agree that they wanted to be part of the landmark district. It is the largest landmark district in Pasadena. And in the early 2000s, part of that city landmark, not the whole part of it, but part of it became a national landmark district. So we've got a few national landmark districts as well as city landmark districts. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how does that affect the state program of accessory dwelling units in a landmark area?
We have to follow the state laws. We can't bypass state laws. So if the state says that you can have these accessory dwelling units on your property, we can't say you can't. We can, if it's visible from the right of way, so if I'm standing on the sidewalk and I can see your accessory dwelling unit, then we have a say about that. Like, you know, you can't build necessarily a contrasting architectural style within a landmark district. But we can't designate whether they can or not do it. All right? Well, thank you for having me. Please find us on the website.